Hello everybody and welcome to another video. So today I will be reviewing Affinity Photo. So I'm going to give you guys a disclaimer before we start. So full disclaimer, this is not a sponsored video. I personally purchased both Affinity Photo and Designer for my work, and I'm currently testing it to see if at some point it may be functional for professional use. Although I'll be pointing out quite a few features which I'd like to see implemented, my overall view of this software is positive. But it's currently missing some core features which would help make it more attractive for industry professionals. I'm personally speaking as someone who's worked in a print shop where I've done minor graphic work and layout, and working professionally within the animation field as a background painter. Please keep in mind that some of these recommendations may only apply to PC users, since some features are still lacking on this platform. So all my views and opinions will be based on my personal experience within these fields or within the Windows ecosystem. To begin, most of the basic features that you would expect to find in a professional drawing software are present in this one. The layers panel is set up on the right hand side with the typical default tabs of color, swatches, stroke, brushes, effects, styles, text styles, transform, history, and navigator. On the left-hand side, the most common tools are present along with some additional ones. Some of these new features include color replacement brush and the pixel tool. Another feature which has been added to the interface is the separation of key components, which are referred to as personas. Although I'm not fond of the naming convention, its functionality is appealing. Each of these personas have a specific set of tools and panels associated with their use and greatly diversifies the interface further. You have the photo persona, which is best suited for painting and drawing tasks. The liquify persona allows you to distort and manipulate the existing layers, although these will have to be selected prior to entering this mode. The develop persona is more geared towards photo editing of raw files. The last persona is the export persona, and this one is used to prepare files for export. While the number of existing filters are fewer, the most commonly used ones are also present. There are some compatibility issues you as a consumer need to know prior to investing in this software. The current version that I tested was both the 1.5.2 version alongside the beta 1.6.0.81. And this was just prior to an upcoming release of a software update. The current versions tested do not support clipping masks that have been applied to groups, which is a feature that was added to CS6 and CC versions of Photoshop. In most modern television productions, this is a feature which has become essential for both conceptual artists as well as freelancers who have to reproduce the same coloring as their reference material. Not having this makes it virtually impossible to properly view the image and reproduce the results. In future iterations, I would like to see better compatibility with newer versions of Photoshop, since this would allow studios to more easily transition their workflow to this application. The number one recommended feature is a modification of the magic wand, also known as the flood selection tool. Although this tool functions properly when sampling a single layer, it is severely lacking an important attribute. This tool in the current version is unable to make a selection via multiple layers or even groups. This is an essential option to have in one of the most basic tool sets. Although the brush selection tool does have this feature, it will never replace the flood selection tool because they're both addressing two different workflow styles. The flood selection tool is better suited for filling in line work, whereas the brush selection tool is better suited for editing photos where definitive edges are often ambiguous. Affinity doesn't yet implement a keyboard shortcut for resetting the default swatches to black and white. There is a workaround for this, but it isn't automatically implemented. The current workaround for this was originally posted by RSI Studio on the Affinity forums. In order to enable this feature, you will need to do the following. Go to Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts, Photo, Miscellaneous, Set Fill to Black and White, and make sure to allocate a keyboard shortcut for this feature. If the shortcut you've chosen causes a conflict with an existing shortcut, simply click on the triangle with the exclamation mark to change that one as well. The next recommendation addresses some of the customization options for keyboard shortcuts. Although the flexibility of the shortcut menu is in some cases better than Photoshop, it can be difficult to navigate because of a lack of hierarchy grouping. Another suggested bonus would be to list keyboard shortcuts such as Alt, Control, and Shift keys in relationship to how they are used. For instance, when I'm using the brush tool, I can hold down the Alt key to switch to the eyedropper or color picker tool. Having some of these basic shortcuts listed within the tool, even if it isn't possible to modify them, would make it more user-friendly. They have done a pretty good job at listing some of the options below the work window, which does help alleviate this to a certain degree. This recommendation will apply to workflows where the comparing of different images is a necessity. It is also important to point out that this feature, which is only currently available in Mac versions of the software. Being able to split screen or dock windows beside each other is very important for most production settings. This allows for immediate comparison of images while being able to load additional images within the same windows. A great example of this is if I have a reference image of a scene and I have to color something in a very similar color palette. It is far easier to have the image on one side while working on the uncolored version on the other. The allocation of a scratch disk seems to be something which some argue isn't a necessity because of the optimization of the software. This does, however, depend on the use case. It isn't uncommon to have multiple reference images for one scene and therefore have several large files open simultaneously. Not having to constantly close and open files greatly speeds up productivity and means more income for freelance workers. On a normal show, it isn't uncommon to have 50 files open simultaneously, in which each one is between 1.5 gigabytes to 2 gigs in size. Even with great optimization, it is unlikely that a computer, even with 32 gigs of RAM, would be able to functionally handle such a large load. Once again, this is a feature which would greatly benefit professional use case scenarios and should be taken into heavy consideration in future updates. A feature which isn't often known to those who don't work in the professional industry is a little secret that Photoshop has regarding layers. If a layer is held while the Alt key is pressed, this will duplicate the layer and allow you to move it wherever you want within the layers panel. This is something which has the added flexibility of working with individual layers and multiple ones regardless of their location within the layers panel. This is a feature which once again greatly improves speed at which any digital artist can work. The stroke feature works differently than would be expected and in some cases can be limiting. Having a stroke option where a vector-based path can have a pixel-based brush style applied would definitely be handy for individuals who are working on conceptual-based pieces. In this workflow, the artist would be able to create a path which their brush would be able to follow, and in turn they could easily erase portions or paint over the regions. This would also help separate some of the functions of both Affinity Photo tools and Affinity Designer. This next recommendation may seem unusual, however it is something which is becoming more and more necessary as time goes by because of the current style in which animated series are moving towards. Being able to sample both the original color used in a layer as well as the current color is something which will be necessary in the future. When working with a reference background, it isn't uncommon for a layer that has a transparency or opacity to be flattened before it's sent off to the freelancers. What this means for the freelancer is that the original color information still needs to be accessible. This is currently something that Photoshop does automatically. However, it isn't unable to sample the current color as well. What a freelancer requires is both options to be available depending on the use case. An underused but very good feature which would make things a lot easier for most freelancers and artists alike would be a note-taking feature. This feature should be kept pretty basic, however, with some additional features which would make it more useful to the average and professional artists. Color coding options would make this more readable and easier to organize, as well as being able to allocate it to a specific layer and having the ability to turn the visibility on or off. Continuing with the color coding theme, it would be very helpful indeed if a color coding option was added to the layers panel. This makes it easier to communicate important layer information without having to include in-depth notes. Rotating the canvas may seem unnecessary, but once again, this is another feature which will depend on the use case. This is a feature which is greatly appreciated by layout artists who often find themselves drawing in awkward angles. For some of these artists, the line work is done in a pixel-based software to achieve a more stylized look in the line work, and therefore the use of the pen tool isn't something which would be functional. This is also another reason why having a stroke option is highly recommended. Although some have requested the addition of artboards, I do not necessarily find this to be a necessity because this feature is more suitable for Affinity Designer, not necessarily for Affinity Photo. Now, Affinity does a lot of things correctly, and I will give these a mention because they are important factors to consider for any artist. Stability. Affinity has a strong focus on stability and fixing glitches, which is something that I find a lot of companies tend to overlook. This is essential in building a stronger user base and is clearly something they've focused on. The company tends to release new versions once it's been fully tested, and they allow existing users to download betas of upcoming revisions, which don't override the existing installments of stable versions. This treatment of the beta implementation is key to ensuring more stable versions in the future, and other companies could learn a lot from this approach. Continual clipping of layers. Even if this doesn't currently work for groups, this is something which has been well implemented. You can keep clipping elements to each other for pretty much as long as you desire, which is a welcome approach. If they were able to find a method to do the same with groups, then they would be able to resolve some of the compatibility issues with current versions of Photoshop. The tools palette and the toolbar can be fully customized to the user's preference. The existing UI is very well organized and easy to learn, so transitioning was relatively easy. By keeping things as simple as possible, they avoid overloading the user with information, which is a bonus to anyone moving over from another interface. The clone stamp tool is a well-needed improvement. They've added a crosshair, which is visible while painting in an area, so you know which location the sampling of the color is taking place. This makes things a lot easier because you can now see where you'll need to change the sampling area rather than waiting to discover this as you work. The final verdict for the software will depend on the user type. If you work at home and aren't working for a company, then this software might just be for you, since it has most of the core features you'll need to do your work. With a price tag of only $70 before taxes, this is a much more cost-effective alternative, even if the price has gone up since it was first released. If you're a freelancer, however, it still comes a bit short because the industry standard is Photoshop and some features which would be required are still missing. If Affinity could find a way to fix the compatibility issues with newer versions of Photoshop, then I don't see any reason why this couldn't replace Photoshop entirely in the future. In its current state, the software is clearly geared towards photographers and photo manipulation techniques, because most of the new features seem to be moving towards those fields. So for home users, I will give it a mark of 8.5 out of 10 overall, because they are least likely to have to submit work in a preset pipeline in which suggested features would be necessary. For professional users, I give it a mark of 7 out of 10 because of its incompatibility issues with newer versions of Photoshop features, as well as the lack of core elements to its interface. How Affinity implements features that makes it fast to use as well as compatible through other software packages will definitely be what determines how it's adopted by industry professionals. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.